Hello all, Rick here with a video on the first non-canonical Starship that this series has tackled. 45 videos so far and none of them have been from outside appearances in the shows. There are more vessels than I thought. Anyway, this video is covering the USS Theseus, a strange prototype starship that features as the hero vessel of the Star Trek comics following the missions of the returned Benjamin Sisko and crew on a mission from the Prophets. I plan to do a video separately on the actual comic line itself some point soon, as I've read a bit further on. Until then, let's take a look at this one-of-a-kind ship. I'd like to thank Endeavour Gaming for letting me use their Theseus class as a model for this video. The real origins for this class is for the IDW line of comics, as mentioned, and it was designed by Ramon Rosanas as a vessel with the idea drawn from the Ship of Theseus thought experiment, which I'm fairly sure most sci-fi fans are familiar with by now, what with it being covered in numerous other shows too. Suffice to say, every component of this vessel by now has been replaced, yet technically it's still the same USS Theseus. This particular ship found its new lease in the late 2370s as Starfleet was beginning to pioneer newer technologies in favour for its next stage in development standards. However, it would not go on to become a full class of vessel, being one of the few instances where the prototype served its purpose and the developments it made were instead filtered down onto other vessels. However, its origin was long before this, and it was originally constructed in 2268 from the Utopia Planitia shipyards, and one of its first missions was on a diplomatic overture to the Zenkethi which went disastrously. It also ran afoul of Voyager, and in 2377 it was pulled from the line altogether and marked as an experimental technology testing vessel. Thus, it was handed over to Starfleet's Research and Development and the Corps of Engineers until it was decommissioned in full in 2317. Originally, many of its developments would have been classified, but by the time of its decommissioning those developments were out in the open and the standard for Starfleet. However, that was not to be the end of the vessel. In 2370, it was pulled from mothballs on the request of Captain Montgomery Scott. This was because he was more familiar with the older class, but had many unorthodox innovations to make based on the newer technologies available to him after he time-skipped 76 years on the Jenolan. Basically, it was his personal playground. During its reconstruction, it was a classified vessel that drew on the expertise of numerous other notable engineers, including Geordie LaForge and, after she returned from Voyager, B'Elanna Torres. By 2377 it had a second lease on life as a new experimental vessel, and a year later it was assigned on to Captain Benjamin Sisko for his months-long pursuit of a mission in his role as emissary and a Starfleet officer. Among many hidden technologies, the vessel included an omnidirectional trilithium phaser array, an enhanced flight and impulse designs, and the basics for the protostar drive, as well as an undisclosed solar voltaic power array alongside its warp core. It should be noted, however, that although this vessel has a protostar drive, it was by no means ready, the USS Protostar being the vessel to actually smooth out the drive. In fact, accelerating to proto-warp resulted in damage to Theseus's hull due to containment errors, making the drive untenable for long jaunts. The ship could travel at a cruising speed of around warp 8 and a maximum of warp 9.9 under its own power. However, although it seems that this was a strain that would result in shorter times than other vessels can achieve at this speed. It had manoeuvrability of a far smaller vessel, thanks to its impulse modifications, able to fly pretty much like a Defiant class. And it also was outfitted with solar sails at one point for navigation into a zone where engines would ignite a dangerous substance. It was Jake Sisko's idea. The trilithium phaser array is powered using this dangerous substance, which itself is capable of preventing a star's fusion and occasionally saw use in other weapons, such as Romulan torpedoes. What is more impressive, however, is that the array can be tied into the solar voltaic power source that charged the proto-drive, to create a beam of 273% the power of a standard phaser. But, as with many systems on the Theseus, this was not sustainable for long. It also housed a multi-phasic scanner and a specialised quantum field deflector array used to peer through cloaking fields. One of its labs was a photonic analysis lab, which itself was essentially a holodeck loaded with science equipment and hooked up to the main computer's core's database to simulate any needed environment for experimentation. This, however, resulted in an emergent artificial intelligence, so that did not go according to plan. The Theseus is a well-named vessel, considering it was completely overhauled from its original 2260s configuration and even received several additions and alterations during its 24th century run. We have seen numerous prototypes before, and usually, when a Starfleet vessel is constructed, it's done for some purpose or to fulfill a niche that has emerged in the fleet. Defence vessels, long-range explorer, long-term explorer, survey ship, and so on. This Discovery Theseus variant is not that at all, but more of a throw everything at the wall and see what sticks kind of ship. It was essentially a true testbed of a vessel, outfitted to run a certain system or technology, then have that system gutted and another installed, leading to the replacement of many parts. This hodgepodge of devices creates a truly unique vessel that, as far as I can tell, is literally a one-of-a-kind. It does have a great deal of modularity, leading it to be easily refit for different mission profiles, although the many classified systems it contains means that it was never really supposed to venture far beyond Federation territory. When a technology proves viable like the protodrive, it's then penned for a newer vessel to take up that mantle and test it out properly. The Protostar needed to happen because although the drive concept was first tested in the Theseus, this ship was not made for it, and a dedicated craft was required to further explore the idea. The same can be said for any other system at play within this ever-changing vessel. Thanks for watching this breakdown on the lore of the Theseus Discovery class starship. And again, thanks to Endeavour Gaming, link to their channel in the description below if you want to see some more beauty shots. I intend to cover more canon ones, but this one stood out to me enough, and eventually I'll explore some other apocryphal designs. So until the next video, I've been Rick, thanks again, and goodbye.